今日のドジャースは試合前から大きな注目を集めていました。この日のドジャースは打順にも大きな変化を加えました。ここまで大谷翔平選手の後ろを打っていたベッツ選手を4番へ、そしてパヘス選手を大谷翔平選手の後ろに置くという思い切った打順変更が行われました。ベッツは怪我から復帰した後、直近12試合で51打数8安打、打率1割5分7厘と苦しんでいました。不振に苦しんでいたベッツにとって4番での先発出場はレッドソックス時代の2017年以来実に9年ぶり。そして今日の先発はエリック・ラウアー投手。ドジャースはスネルの左肘手術を受け、今月17日にブルージェイズから DFA となっていたラウアーを金銭トレードで獲得。昨週のワールドシリーズ第3戦、延長18回までもつれた死闘では12回途中から登板し、4回3分の2を2安打無失点に抑える好投を見せていました。この采配がいきなり試合の流れを変えることになります。初回、2アウト1塁、ロッキーズ先発のフリーランドがカウントのボール2ストライクから投じた内角 90.7 マイル、約 145.9 キロのストレート。ベッツは腕を畳みながら力強く振り抜きました。押し込んだ打球はぐんぐん伸び、バックスクリーンへ一直線。打球速度 100.7 マイル、約162キロ、飛距離404フィート、約123メートルの一発となりました。不振に苦しんでいたベッツのホームランにベンチの大谷翔平選手らも大喜び。さらに前日に復帰したキケにもホームランが飛び出し、ドジャースは着実に得点を重ねていきます。一方で4回の第3打席、大谷翔平選手は4球目のチェンジアップが抜け、右手首付近に死球を受けます。ガードの上から当たった形には見えましたが、大谷翔平選手は顔を歪め、かなり痛そうな表情を見せました。すぐにベンチからトレーナーが飛び出し、状態を確認。大谷翔平選手は右手を閉じたり開いたりしながら、感覚を確かめるような動作を見せました。その後、プレーは続行し、パヘスの二塁打の間に本塁へ激走で生還。翌日に二刀流での出場を控えているだけに、状態は非常に気になるところです。その後、5回の第4打席ではラッシング選手と途中交代となった大谷翔平選手。ドジャースネーションは、大谷翔平が前回の打席で手元に死球を受けたため、ダルトン・ラッシングが指名打者として出場している。ドジャースが10対1とリードしており、大谷は明日の先発が予定されていることから、予防措置としての交代かもしれない。と投稿。さらに、この後ドジャースはベッツ選手の今日2本目のホームランで15対6の大勝。連勝を4に伸ばしています。
Mookie, you have a big smile on your face. You had 3 hits today, 2 of them happen to be home runs. You crushed the ball. How good does it feel right now? Not only just being right here, picking up this win, but getting some positive results today.
It feels great just to help the boys. I mean, it's been a long time, but it is what it is. You know, these guys in here, I mean, I love them so much. They supported me, you know, through the ups and the downs, and it's been a lot of downs, but they've been right here every step of the way. Just keep patting me on the back, keep telling me to keep going, and we finally made it work.
Since coming off the IL, you've been looking to feel something. What do you think has been the biggest difference maker for you that led to those results today?
I mean, we went through a couple mechanical things, and I know it's easy to just say go play, but you know, there's also like a battle of trying to figure out where my body is. I've gained some weight. I mean, you know, I went from 160 pounds last year to 180 this year, and so a lot has changed. And so really just trying to figure out where everything is at, and I think we may be all right.
And of course, we saw how this group came together: 17 hits, 15 runs. How do you describe just the offensive outbreak that you saw today?
I mean, I think this is something that we're very capable of. Obviously, you know, we would love to do it all the time. It's just part of the season, you know, ups and downs. But we played really well today, but we got to flush it and be ready for tomorrow.
And it started with Eric Lauer. What was he able to do to set the tone for this group? And how impressive was it to see him have his Dodger debut today?
Yeah, it's awesome. He's been on the other side for so long. You know, it's finally on our side, and we get to see how he goes about it. I mean, he's awesome in the clubhouse. He's a great dude, and you know, he showed his competitive nature on the mound, and he pitched awesome.
Mookie, remarkable performance on the plate tonight. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've been pretty honest about how the start of the season has gone for you and how you obviously would have liked for it to start much better, but being able to move down in the order and see a little bit more pitches, do you think that helped at all tonight?
No, I don't think that has anything to do with anything. I think it's just work. Just continue to put in work. It doesn't matter if I'm hitting ninth or first or whatever. It's the same work. And yeah, pretty much just put it to that.
Seems like it's been a while that you hit a ball that hard. How did it feel just kind of watching the ball come off the bat like that the way it did in the first inning?
I don't even know how hard I hit it, so I mean, I hit a ball last week, pretty good, so it hasn't been too long. I think the main thing is just consistently doing it, and I think we'll see how tomorrow goes.
You look so exuberant on the first homer. Yeah, was it a load off? Were you feeling as you were running the bases a little bit?
Not as much with the home run as much as just I think the work worked, if that makes sense. So I think the work that we put in finally translated. Or the other days, the work I put in didn't necessarily translate. So it was more of a excitement from that. Obviously, home run is exciting and whatnot, but I think it's just finally translated.
You talked in spring training about last year and how during the course of last year you kind of learned how to separate the team stuff from the individual stuff. As you were kind of going through this year, how well were you able to kind of separate those two things?
I mean, that's still the same. That hasn't changed. My goal is to help the boys. I mean, in the game yesterday, I actually got to lay down and go to sleep just because I had a sac fly. So those are the things that matter the most to me. And so, yeah, of course, I would love to, go crazy, hit a bunch of homers and get a bunch of hits and whatnot. But if it's not winning ball games, then it doesn't really matter.
I mean, compared to some of the things I've played through in the past, it was nothing. And yeah, it was a little more than nothing. So.
We talked to Dave for a while in the dugout afterwards. Like, what was sort of his message to you after that? He understood how frustrated I was, and he was trying to get me to keep my head up. Honestly, at that point, I was kind of not there, so I'm not necessarily sure everything that he said to me. He said that he was sorry that this happened to me, and I told him I was sorry too for not being able to post and just play the rest of the year. But yeah, it was kind of sorry that this is happening, and keep your head up. It's gonna be okay. And I don't really have much other than we'll find out tomorrow how bad it is.
I know you need more information, but what do you see as the best and worst case scenario?
I have no idea, honestly. Like I said, I've never done an oblique. Probably at the minimum a couple of weeks. So I'm hoping that it's best case scenario. It's hopefully just a grade 1 and, at least 2-3 weeks and I'm back, but who knows.
Do you feel the oblique only when swinging or when you're doing other things as well?
Yeah, that's kind of why I thought I could play, because I only felt it during when I was swinging, but then after the homer, I in between innings throwing to first, I was feeling it, and when I had the double, it didn't just hurt to swing, it also hurt to run, so I knew that it was time to stop.
I apologize that you already answered this, but it was something that you felt ahead of the game, and then the time felt a little bit worse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I did it during batting practice yesterday, but first game back, did it during batting practice, so I was pretty embarrassed that I did that, and I didn't really tell anybody about it, because I just thought it was a small tweak, a little tightness, but today it felt more than that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Eric, first, just getting out there, Dodgers debut. What was it like for you? Obviously, it's been a couple of weeks since you last took the mound, but getting out there today, being part of this group.
Yeah, it was fun. Like you said, it was nice to get back out there and play some ball again. And it's always fun playing in Dodger Stadium, and now I get to do it a lot more. So I'm really excited about that.
From my understanding, they kind of wanted you to just go out there, be yourself tonight, and then if they find that there's something they want you to work on, they'll go from there. What has the experience been from your side, and is there anything that you're working on coming into this start?
There's a few things that I was working on, a couple slight adjustments that I wanted to make that I had been working on. But yeah, overall, they kept it pretty simple for me this week to where it wasn't like, let's work on too many things, let's make adjustments. They said just go out there, kind of be yourself. You've had some rest, so we want to see what you're like, as a normal guy, and then we'll kind of tinker after that. So I think it was good. I think me and Will worked really well together, and I mean, I had no complaints. Just one not great pitch, and good hitters are going to do stuff with that. So,
how much did the run support further simplify things, or were you just going to pitch that way regardless of lead? No lead?
I think my goal is to always pitch the same. Always pitch as if it's a 0-0 ball game, and just go out there and try to get outs as quick as possible. But it definitely helps. Knowing that you have that in your back pocket, and then it becomes, how long can I stay in this game to save the bullpen?
You've seen this lineup do that kind of stuff from afar. How nice was it that it was in your back pocket this time?
Oh, it's great. I love that. I love when there's run support. There's no better feeling than having just unlimited runs to work with as a pitcher. So you don't want to fall into the trap of I have runs to give up, but it allows you to go out there and kind of relax a little bit more and focus on what you're doing, because the guys behind you are doing what they're supposed to do.
Have they told you anything about the future? Is it just pitch and hope that it's good enough to stick around as long as possible?
That's a weird question.
I mean, what do you know about the?
Yeah, I think the goal for me is just put together a bunch of good outings, and after that, I think we'll see what the need is and where the need is, and we'll go based off that. But I mean, my goal, as far as I'm concerned, is just go out there and have good outings. You got it.
How's Shohei's hand?
It's good. I think a little bit it got him on the hand or the pad, but I think it clipped his pinky a little bit. But I think we're in a good spot. And I think for me, I just wanted to. We had a good lead, get Dalton a couple at bats, and then get Shohei off his feet to get ready for tomorrow's start. He is going to start tomorrow. I haven't decided yet if he's going to hit. I just want to kind of make sure how he comes in and physically how he feels, because want to make sure he feels really good, on the pitching side of things.
そして明日はさらに大きな注目カードが待っています。ドジャースは大谷翔平選手が先発予定。一方のロッキーズは菅野智之選手が先発する見込みです。大谷翔平選手と菅野智之選手はメジャーの舞台で打者と投手として対戦したことはあります。しかし先発投手同士として投げ合うのは今回が初めてです。日本球界を代表してきた2人の先発投手がメジャーの舞台で初めて投げ合うのか、試合前から大きな注目を集めることになりそうです。以上、今回もご視聴いただきありがとうございました。別の動画でもお会いできるのを楽しみにしております。